Welcome to the latest episode of the Best of Cool Culture Corner. We look back at some of the early episodes of the podcast Cool Culture Corner and apply them to today in the world of COVID pandemic and divisiveness and elections and unrest and possibly the most interesting and complex year of our lives of 2020, soon to be 2021. Hi, I'm Ken Bader, your host for both the Best of Cool Culture Corner and Cool Culture Corner. And I'm going to look back at the very first podcast I ever did, which was episode 1 of Cool Culture Corner, where I talked about, do you feel the burn in your culture? So obviously this was before the last presidential election. And I talked specifically, when I talked about Bern, I talked about Bernie Sanders. And I realize here, as I'm recording this on election day, Tuesday, November 3rd, that Bernie Sanders is not available as a choice. Frankly, I didn't support him. And to put this out there, I am a firm believer when it comes to our choices of president of that portion of the election. I am personally, as an American citizen and a voter, very disappointed with the choices that we have. I have yet to see any of the candidates on the ballot that are really going to give our country what it needs today, which is unity, which is to begin bringing down the divisiveness. I don't see that regardless of who wins. I hope and I pray that we can find a way to find some unity. And that's what I want to cover in the Best of Cool Culture Corner today. I'm about to play a small portion of episode 1. Do you feel the burn in your culture? And then I want to cover a couple of things. But as a funny, lighter note to all this, I will say that it's always painful to go back, especially for all of you fellow podcasters and YouTubers out there. It's always painful to go back and listen to that first episode and say, wow, what was I thinking? But ironically, I actually had a little less of that feeling with this particular episode 1, than I did with some of the other episodes in the teens and the 20s and so forth. But regardless, let's listen to a small portion of episode 1, and I want to cover a couple of points that I think are really relevant today. Let's listen.
And today we're going to talk about, do you feel the burn in your culture? And when I say burn, I don't mean B-U-R-N. That's the play on words that Bernie Sanders has used in his campaign this year. And as of this particular recording, Hillary Clinton has gained the nomination, or is the presumptive nominee, whatever the heck that means. I'm not a politician myself, for the Democratic Party. But what's interesting to me, and for the record, I am not a supporter of any of the candidates. Wasn't from the very beginning of the 2016 election. I just simply don't feel that any of them were truly qualified for what our country needs here in the United States. But regardless of that, what I do really find is that this has been the most interesting and definitely the most entertaining presidential election in my lifetime. And as Steve Olsher, who I really enjoy listening to on Reinvention Radio, has said before, it's not necessarily a matter of whether we like someone or not, but what can we learn from that? And while I'm not necessarily a Bernie Sanders fan, it's clear that he was able to gain a real passionate following. Ironically, just a couple days before this recording, I was sitting outside on my front porch, and a couple of people walked by with Bernie Sanders shirts and just wanted to talk to me about Bernie Sanders and get me to vote for Bernie. And I just wished him a good day. Said I wasn't going to be voting for Bernie, and hope that they enjoyed the rest of their little trip down my block. But what can we learn about culture building, about team building from Bernie Sanders? Well, one, he obviously talked in their voice. I think that it's generally accepted that his following were primarily millennials, and he certainly hit the trigger points to them, whether it was a better future or a free education or whatever his particular foundation was. It spoke to them because he had a huge following, and as of this particular day, he still hasn't conceded because of that very loyal group of raving fans. But I think we can learn two things about culture building from Bernie Sanders. One, on somewhat of a surface level, is simply being able to engage our team, engage our following, and to create a following, is to talk their language. Definitely not necessarily at all to make empty promises or make promises that we can't or may not be able to keep, which may have been the case with Bernie Sanders. We probably will never really know. But he certainly tapped into what was most important to them. And I think on a very basic level, we need to tap into what's important to our team, more so than any other time in business. I truly, truly believe that we can't properly create an experience or a brand for our customers, clients, members, target audience, whatever we want to call them, without first creating an experience for our employees, for our team, for the people that are going to serve those people. And we can't create that experience without engaging them on some level.
So, it's interesting as I listen back to that episode 1 back in 2016 that I said basically the same thing I just said as we began this episode, which is I don't like our choices. I don't support any of the candidates, which is really, really unfortunate from a voter and American citizen standpoint. But also, I will say, when I get into those conversations, because while I don't support any of the current candidates for the presidential election, I do often share that in discussions when people want to tout Donald Trump, or they want to tout Joe Biden, or they want to tout somebody else. I always say, I don't like any of these folks. Why do you like your candidate? Because I would really like to like one. I would really like to connect and say, this is the person without question that can bring our country together and take us to the next stage of growth and take us out of all of this chaos. But saying that actually does get me into more of a conversation of, well, what really does need to be done. And I find at least that saying that, especially since it's sincere and it's true, allows me to have that conversation. And I play in a lot of different circles. Granted, I do not work as a traditional employee-employer relationship, but I think that it's important, especially those folks that are still in person in an office, to be able to make that connection despite political lines. I would like to think, because I mentioned the divisiveness in that first episode, and I feel it even more today. I talked about the generations and millennials, Gen X, baby boomers, and that was part of it. But I think we're past that today. I don't think it's a generational thing at all. I think it's much deeper, much harder in some ways. And it's created even more divisiveness than we had 4 years ago. And I didn't think that was possible. So, from a business and culture standpoint, what can we do to begin taking that down a little bit? Obviously, there's the respect of others' opinions. There's the, well, why do you feel that way, and listening. I think that those common basic things are still important, but I think that it's important to understand that that people are passionate today about their political affiliation, what they support, and that's fine. There's no problem with that, and I support that. But at the same time, one of the things that I'm finding too, as we're embracing this technology, because we know that it's here to stay, we know that there's a possibility, hopefully not probability, but there's a possibility that 2021 is still a year of social distancing and a little bit of isolation and so forth because of COVID 19. Hard to believe, but that may very well be possible. And if that's the case, then we're going to be doing a lot more of this type of engagement and interaction from afar. And I found, while it's not, I was telling this to a colleague the other day, while it's not as bad as the telephone, because it seems like we can be ruder, we can be more curt on the phone than we would be in person. Fortunately, when you could see people face to face, there is a little bit more professionalism. There is a little bit more nicety. But I'm starting to see people are treating Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Google, FaceTime more like the phone, where they can be a little bit more rude, curt, blunt. Now, while I like being blunt, it's not usually good to do so at somebody else's expense. I always go back to one of my favorite books, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's all right to have an opinion, it's all right to be blunt, but the relationship is always more important. How can we do so? How can we express our opinion, but not at the expense of the relationship that we have with another person? And the last thing I want to cover here, um, that I talked about in that particular episode, is the why. I think that more than ever, we need to go and really dig into the why. Even when I have some political discussions, where I try to steer it is not about a particular candidate or a particular platform. I go back to much deeper and say, well, why is it that there is such emotion and such divisiveness here? I ask for the why, as to, well, why is there a divide? And why can't we find some type of common ground? Because delving into that why somebody feels that way, why somebody is passionate about that. Same thing in a business culture with a basic business idea, which is not as visceral as politics. Yeah, but I've seen this in strategy meetings several times over the past 2 decades, where somebody just digs in their heels for or against a particular goal or objective. And they don't even really know or dig into the why. I think that part of relationship building, part of building a cool culture corner, is not only respect for the individual, even though you disagree, but really digging in as far as you can into the why they feel and think that way. If we truly do that from a sincere and safe nature, not as a dig on the person, but a journey to really understand, I think we're all going to be better off. And I think that we will have a real opportunity still. And maybe I'm naive, maybe I'm ignorant, but I truly do believe this, that regardless of who's in the White House, regardless of who has control over the Senate or Congress or state or whatever the heck it is, that we can, if we treat people with respect, truly try to understand the why of the other person, that we can continue to build a cool culture corner in our business and, of course, beyond. Thanks for spending a little bit of time with me today. And here's hoping, as always, that you have a cool culture corner in your unique business. Take care.
Now a word from our sponsor, Bader Training and Consulting. BTC is the creator of the B plus C plus S formula. Our clients that implement that formula increase their net income by 124% and grow their business by 17% on average. The best place to start working with Bader Training and Consulting is with our B plus C plus S audit. The service pinpoints issues as well as attributes of your business's unique brand, culture, and strategy. Learn more or sign up for a B plus C plus S audit at www.btcinc.net/BCS-audit.